Patriots, the definitive encyclopedia of the world-class franchise, the book delves into the rich history of the New England Patriots with an unparalleled enthusiasm for the statistics and stories that comprise one of the most respected franchises in professional sports. From the team's early days in the AFL, where the Boston Patriots were led by Butch Songen, you can tell I'm not familiar with the older players, Gino Cappelletti and Babe Parilli, to its dynasty days under the leadership of Tom Brady. Football fans and historians are sure to enjoy this talk. So Bob is a Patriots historian, he's an NFL photographer for Patriots home games, and he's been a loyal Patriots fan since 1968. So let's give Bob a big round of applause for joining us. Thanks so much, Bob. And Bob's going to wander, he's going to tell stories and answer your questions.
So one of the things that I do, I work with a crew, and this is my view of the Patriots when I'm taking pictures. I've been doing this for 13 years now. And the idea is I'm either on top of the scoreboard where the Gillette Stadium is up top there. Here's a picture of me with my camera. Or I'm at the other end zone. And there's a crew of 4 of us, and every team has their own crew. So I work for the Patriots home games with Scott, Mike, and John. And what we do is we take pictures so that we can identify from our pictures who's actually in every single play. So I'm up in one end zone, the other guy's in the other end zone. We take pictures before the play happens, so when someone looks at the pictures, you can see either their back or their uniform, and they type in, here's 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense. And then at the end of the game, I've got some reports from some of the Super Bowls. This is what's published to the media. Who's the starting lineup? And then at the back, it talks about percentage of plays. You know, Gronk was in 38% of the offensive plays, and Matthew Slater was in 100% of the special team plays. That information comes from our pictures. So I'm taking pictures, 3 or 4 pictures before the play happens. I'll probably take 1,000 pictures during the game. It's a little intense to, you see the replay. Oh, they're back in the huddle. They're going no snap. You're taking pictures. But
you weren't taking pictures of the Jets, were you?
No, that wasn't. That was a Patriots employee.
That was a joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that Spygate thing was. If he was 20 feet different, it wouldn't have been anything. But he was up in the stands, whatever. But and it really had no effect on anything. But that wasn't me. That was before me. So I'm just blessed. I mean, when the guy Stacey James comes in, you want a job? What am I supposed to say? No. Yeah. What am I gonna do? I don't know. We'll figure it out. So I'm out there. There's been 2 games in the 13 years where this finger went raw because at the end of each quarter I have to take a disc out and put another disc in, so you got to expose your hand in the wet and the cold. But that's pretty good. And 2 out of I don't know how many games I've been there, 130, 140 with playoffs and everything. We've been pretty lucky with the weather. Yeah. No, it's been blessed. So the idea of this whole thing is really to talk about the beginning of the Patriots right up to now, So in 1959, this guy Lamar Hunt says, I want to buy a team in the NFL. And the NFL said, no, we're not expanding. He said, well, I got plenty of money. I'm just going to start a new league then. And he came up with the American Football League. And he had plenty of money. And he got a bunch of people and said, all right, you want a team, you want a team, you want a team. The first team in LA was actually the LA Chargers. Now they're back to LA, but it was LA Chargers. Then they moved to San Diego. And then, 50, 60 years later, they're back to LA. But there was the Dallas Texans. They moved to Kansas City. Matter of fact, there is a game in 1961 where the Patriots are playing at Boston University. And they had 5,000 people show up with not enough seats for them. So they have 25,000 seats, 30,000 people show up. It's a Friday night right downtown. So there's 5,000 people around the infield, 3 or 4 deep all the way around. It ends up that a guy runs on the field one of the last plays of the game to kind of allow the Patriots to win. I got a picture of that here. Yep, somewhere. And how did I do it? There it is. So this is a Friday night. We're playing against the Dallas Texans. Hank Stram was their coach. And you see this guy that's circled here. What happens is, with about 2 seconds left, everyone thought the game was over. So everyone that's on the sidelines, 4 or 5 deep, they crowd the field, and the referee says, no, there's one more play left. So now the people that are on the field, now they just have to get off the field. So there's one guy in the end zone. He's on the field. Oh, we won. No, one more play. So he kind of goes like this, and then he starts going back on the field again. So as they're setting up, hut 1, hut 2, the quarterback's just going to throw a quick slant pass to Chris Burford, and this guy runs on the field. Now the referee is here, so he sneaks in behind the referee, so the referee doesn't see him, and he kind of slides over where Teddy Bruschi be. And as the guy goes back to pass, he's waving his arms. The ball goes over his head. We ended up winning the game. So you can Google this. There's a little video of it. It's the Crazy Fan in 1961, and when we play the Kansas City Chiefs, they show this. But this is just a 40-year-old guy ran on the field. That was the first 12th man ever. And we ended up winning the game, but that could have tied it up if they scored it. So, yeah, we didn't know. Somebody thought it was actually affiliated with Billy Sullivan, because he owned the team back then. But, I mean, back in the day, the Patriots used to practice everywhere. They used to practice up here in Lawrence, in Lowell, in Haverhill, Concord. Here's a picture of them practicing at Concord High School. Okay? So sometimes they'd be practicing, and during the day, and when the kids had recess, back when we had recess, the teachers would come out and say, these kids got to do recess for 20 minutes, you guys got to take a break. And they would kick the Patriots off the field so the kids could run around and get some exercise and go back into school. But here's a picture of Babe Perilli and Gino Cappelletti and some of the guys from the 60s, 61, 62, and this kid's walking right through practice with his skates, like, what are you guys doing here? I got to go to the pond over there. Sorry. It was crazy back then, But, we mentioned before some of the places that they used to play. So here's one of the first things, the Los Angeles Chargers, Then they played at BU Field for a couple of years. Some of the programs back then were very colorful, just kind of, 50 cents for this. You try to buy the program now, it's, 50, 80, 100 bucks. Fenway Park. Yep. So 63 to 68, they played at Fenway Park. My first game, I went with my dad and my uncle. In 1968, we saw Buffalo. They killed us 45 to 10. I didn't care, Jack Kemp and all that. But I got a chance to meet Gino Cappelletti after the game, because 1776 was kind of like a fan club, and my my uncle worked at Polaroid. He said, let me introduce you to Gino. Now Gino, this is 68, 64, Gino was the MVP and the All-Star most valuable player in the league. So here I am, 9 to 10 years old, and I'm meeting a guy that just won the MVP of the league just a couple of years later. That was pretty thrilling to me. I had no idea 50 years later he was going to write the foreword for my book, and I was going to spend hours and hours and hours and hours with him, reminiscing all those games and all those memories. And of course, he was the announcer for very many years, and he's a sweet man. So,
how many teams were original AFL?
There was 8. Yeah, Buffalo Bills, Dallas Texans moved to Kansas City. We had the Houston Oilers, Oakland Raiders, Denver Broncos, and then the Raiders. So you mentioned a little bit about the Buffalo game. So in 61, we were in pretty decent shape. Actually, Gino finished second in the MVP voting in 61, so he was a star then. Everyone went to see Gino. 64, he ends up winning it. But in 63, we ended up with a tie with the Buffalo Bills, and we had to actually go to Buffalo and play them in a playoff game. So the first playoff game that we were ever in was in Buffalo, in a snowstorm up in Buffalo, and what else was happening in December besides the snow? But there was a couple guys like Larry Garron and Bob D and some guys that were kind of smart to do some things. They would wear, during the game, they'd wear a football cleat and they had a sneaker. So, if they wanted to get some maneuverability, they would switch, and Bob D ended up with 2 interceptions because he had one sneaker that he could move around with and one that he could push off with or whatever. And we ended up winning that game, and Larry Garron had 2 touchdowns. He was wearing baseball cleats instead of football cleats. He figured, I'm going to be in the snow. But there was not a lot of, like you see nowadays with equipment and all that kind of stuff. You brought your own stuff, And then eventually we went to San Diego and we got crushed. I mean, one of the things that you didn't hear about that game, two things. And you might hear if you come Saturday, Dick Johnson is going to talk a little bit about that. But back then, I mean, nowadays, they're PEDs and all this kind of stuff, and they do all kind of drug testing. Back then, anything went. So there was what they call greenies and amphetamines and all that kind of stuff. And there was a guy that was actually drafted by the Patriots called Ron Nix. And he wanted to play for San Diego. So we traded, and we got some draft picks, and he ended up in the Hall of Fame. But he was a lawyer, and he played by the rules. And in San Diego, they were doing a lot of stuff that were keeping those guys hyped up. And the other thing is that when we went out there to practice, they actually knew everything. They watched every single practice that we had. So they knew every single call. They knew what purple meant. They knew what black meant. They knew what 42 was. So we had a tendency with Nick Bonaconi and some of our guys to blitz a lot. And when you blitz and they get past the blitz, it's a 60-yard run. And they had 4 or 5 of those. They had Keith Lincoln and Paul Lowe. And if you look at some of the stats, this guy ran for 217 yards. This guy caught passes for 160 yards because once they get past the line of scrimmage, there was a 50 yards. They beat us 56-10. But they knew every single call. They knew how to run a screen pass, a draw play, or whatever, and we got smoked. But then it took many, many years for us to get back to the playoffs. So in the process of doing that, what do? We flounder. Now, has anyone ever heard of Bob Gladio? Ever heard that story?
See, the guy was in the stands. And
Yeah. So this is a classic story, and this is the typical Boston Patriots. So we're playing at BU. BU doesn't want us to play anymore. They kick us out. We go to Fenway Park. Now, if you look at some of the early games at Fenway Park in September, we couldn't play at Fenway Park in September because the Red Sox are playing there. So most of the games that were at Fenway Park were in October on for the Patriots. 67, we actually had to move one game because of the World Series, because the Red Sox were in the World Series. Patriots had to play a home game in San Diego and an away game in San Diego because they made the playoffs. Really, 100-to-1 shot? Oh, well, you got to switch.
Do you do stats for the Revs?
What's that?
Do you do stats for the Revolution or
No.
just the Patriots?
Yeah, I'm the Patriots guy. Yep. That's a whole different ballgame. Yep. And there's probably not a lot of stats with Revolution to begin with,
Little things.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot, but with the stats on football, I mean, they keep track of everything. Yards after catch and all these things that you never even heard of many years ago. So in 1969, we played Boston College. They kick us out in 1970. What are we going to do? Eventually, they moved to Schaefer Stadium in 1971. So Harvard says, all right, we'll give you 1 year. Opening day, 1970, we're playing the Miami Dolphins. It was at Harvard Stadium. Okay. Miami head coach is Don Shula. It's his first game as head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Now, Bob Gladio was a star at Notre Dame. And if you ever seen the movie Rudy, there's actually a scene where in the restaurant, they say, hey, this is Bob Gladio. His name is mentioned in that movie because he's still living in Notre Dame, and he's still living off the fame of 50 years ago when he played, for 2 years with us and a couple of years with Notre Dame. But he was part of a team that won the national championship in 1966. He played with Rocky Blyer, Terry Henready.
Did he have a son named Dan Fletcher? Bob Fletcher?
No, Bob Gladio we're talking about. Yep. So anyways, Bob Gladio gets cut from the team Thursday night, 3 days before the game. He played the year before. He's 24 years old. He's devastated. So the coach said, stick around for a week or two. Don't go back. Who knows? We get injuries. We get some things. So he goes out drinking Friday night, and he goes out drinking Saturday night, and he is actually drinking Sunday morning with his buddies who had tickets to the opening day. He's in a parking lot drinking Schlitz beer, port wine, hot dogs, and hamburgers, and he's pretty much completely hammered by the time the game starts. Well, as the game's, people walking into the crowd, he's like, man, I'm already here. See if I can get into the game. So he goes to the guy and says, you got any tickets? He's sold out. Sorry, you can't get in. He says, you have a program? He says, yeah. He says, look, that's my picture. I'm in the program. Yeah, I guess you are. All right, go ahead, find a seat. And of course, at Harvard, you didn't have seats, so you just sat on benches. So he gets in about 10 minutes after his buddies, and as he walks in, he realizes that the field is really close to the coaches. As he walks in, the coaches are like right there on the sidelines, getting guys, doing calisthenics and stuff. And he says, man, I don't want these guys to see me in this condition, even though he's not on the team anymore. So as he walks into Harvard, he's like, oh my God. So then he gets down on his hands and knees, and he starts crawling past them so that they don't see him, so we can get to an opening. As he's crawling down, his name gets called on the intercom. If Bob Gladio is in the stands, please report to the locker room. And he's like, what? They saw me. Oh, man. But I don't have a job. He goes down there and he says, oh, yeah, we just cut a guy off the team. He didn't want to sign a contract. If he didn't sign the contract, we cleared him out. You need to replace him. Put on your uniform, sign the contract, you're out there. This is 10 minutes before the game. He goes out, and on the kickoff team, the idea is the kicker's here. You got 5 guys on both sides. You run down straight, and then you go towards the ball. He's running down, and he says, anyone hits me, stuff's coming up. I mean, I've been drinking for 3 days. He says, I'm just running down the field. I'll just run off the field. It's one play. What's going to happen? He starts running off the field. The guy, Jake Scott, who gets the ball, he catches it, follows his blockers, sees an opening, leaves his blockers, goes to an opening field, and bumps into Bob Gladio, who didn't even know he was there. They bump into each other. He falls down. He gets credit for the tackle. He becomes famous from a guy that was drunk, hiding from the coaches, signs a contract 10 minutes before the game, makes the tackle, makes 2 more tackles, does throw up later in the game, and plays 2 more years. Because he was kind of one of those kind of guys. So Bob Gladio, that's the quick story of Bob Gladio. So 71, we get Jim Plunkett. We started, we're down at Schaefer Stadium. So now we've kind of big time a little bit, the Heisman Trophy winner. What do we do to get people excited to come to a game? They're having 20,000, 25,000, you got 60,000 people. So they decided they're going to actually hire a guy at halftime. Now, if you've ever been to games, there was marching bands from Malden or whatever, So they hired this guy, Joe Gerlach. Now, Joe Gerlach was a Hungarian cliff diver, and he was an Olympic high diver in the 1956 Olympics. So after the Olympics, he was kind of doing some daredevil things. And they said, all right, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to get a hot air balloon, lift it up in the 50-yard line, put an air cushion down there, and then just leap off, and that'll be the halftime show. I was at this game. So I got a picture of it over there. We can go over that later. So next thing you know, at halftime, they're looking for the band, they're looking for the music, and all of a sudden this hot air balloon gets blown up. This big air mattress gets blown up, and the guy pops out of it. How you doing, folks? And it just goes like this. And he falls down, hits the thing, a gun goes off, and it was like, oh, he's dead, what happened? And he gets up. That was what we had to do to bring people to see the Patriots, because we were so bad. Of course, back in the day, when we played on Monday night, we have a tendency to drink a little bit around here. So we had no idea that, when we had a Monday night game, people would get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. So by the time the game started at 8 or 8:30 or 9, they were already into stage 2 and 3. So there were times there when they would arrest 400 or 500 people in a game. And there was a ban there for about 12 years that we didn't have any more Monday night games because we couldn't handle it. Because people would be drinking Monday and then take Tuesday off. But there were times when they invested 400 people, they didn't know where to put them. The jail in Sharon was closed. They were filled up in Sharon, in Marshfield, in Foxborough, in Attleboro. And how many can you take? 7. We got 150. So they would chain link these guys. Put the handcuffs on the chain links and for 4 or 5 hours until they could find a jail to put them in. Dry it out. But it helped when Chuck Fairbanks showed up, and then we had Steve Grogan and Russ Francis. We had a little bit of a run there, and Raymond Berry come in. So, when I'm starting to do this research and I'm talking to these people, seems like once every 10 years the Patriots would have a good team for 1 or 2 years, and then everything would fall apart. 63, 64, we have that, and then 75, 76. 76 was loaded. Yeah, so in the 76 game, we had beaten the Oakland Raiders 48-17 here at Schaefer Stadium. And that was the only loss that the Oakland Raiders had that year. And one thing I heard about that is the year before, the Patriots were 3-11. So the Oakland Raiders, Kenny Stapler, Fred Blinikonov, some of those kind of guys, they showed up drunk to that game because there were people in the parking lot drinking with them. I met people that were drinking with Ken Stabler and Fred Blinoff before the game. We're like, 3-11, you guys stink. We haven't lost all year. There's no way you're going to beat us. We don't care, you know. And Stabler was a kind of a crazy guy anyways. They go in and we just smoked them. We had some young guys, Darryl Stingley, Grogan, Stanley Morgan. We have some speed. They had no idea what to hit them because they were all, you know, rookies or second-year players. We beat them 48-17. But we lost a couple other games during the year. We finished 11-3. So we had to play a playoff game there. So Oakland, Al Davis said, all right, we lost 48-17 these guys. These guys got speed. What we're going to do is we're not going to cut the grass here because they played on grass back then. So back then, we played at AstroTurf here at Schaefer Stadium. You got a speed guy, you can't catch him. So when we played in Oakland, they grew the grass about 6 inches higher than they should have. They left the water kind of going, so you played in kind of mucky. So it got rid of some of the speed that we had. But there was one play, actually, that Russ Francis, Howard Cosell, if you remember him, called Russ Francis the all-world tight end, right? So he was Gronk before Gronk. So there's a key play, 3rd and 5, and all Russ Francis has to go down about 7 yards, turn around and catch the ball. Steve Grogan throws it to him, and the ball hits him right in the chest, bounces off, because his arms were being held by Phil Vilpiano. This is as far as he could go with his arms. He couldn't get his arms out to catch it. No call, no penalty, no interference. Well, many years later, Russ Francis retires, and Phil Vilpiano was still playing, and Phil Vilpiano makes the Pro Bowl. Now, the Pro Bowl is in Hawaii. Russ Francis is living in Hawaii, and Russ Francis is flying planes in Hawaii and helicopters. So one of the things he would do is you'd go on a tour, and he would take you in a plane, and he would show you the volcanoes and spin you around, and he'd tip the plane a little bit so you could see inside the volcanoes. He calls Vilpiano. He says, I'm going to take you and your wife on a spectacular tour. You're never going to forget it. Vilpiano was 6'5", 270 pounds. He takes them. They're flying around, and as he's flying around, he tips the plane here and there, as you can see in. He says, no, I got a volcano. This is going to be unbelievable. You got to see right in it. So we're going to get right up close. Just bear with me. And as he's getting up there, and he starts to turn, and the plane's kind of sideways like this. As he does it, he reaches back and he unbuckles Phil Vilpiano's seatbelt. Then he opens the door. The wife is screaming hysterically, trying to scratch Russ Francis. Vilpiano's bracing himself, he doesn't fall into the volcano. This only happens for about 4 seconds. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, they even each other out. And he says, remember that playoff game about 10 years ago? Yeah, we're even. So these guys don't forget, you know. But so there's a lot of crazy stories when you meet some of these players. I've had a chance to meet hundreds of players and get all kind of crazy stories. And we've put this together. So in that book there, it talks about the uniform numbers. There's trivia questions. There's every single game is in there, little stats about it. And then there's a section there of all the nicknames and where they went to school, highlights of their career, where they played, all the home games and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of been a fun labor of love to put all this stuff together.
They go up to current?
It goes back to, the book's been out for a while. We're updating the version of this book. We're actually, probably within the next 6 months, we're going to have all of that information in a digital form built into the Patriots Hall of Fame. It's going to be in the wall. So right now I got 168 categories of stats, talking about stats, and there's 1,243 players that I know everything about. Not off the top of my head, but most of them.
So you know everything about Brady?
I've met Brady, yeah.
So have you studied his Michigan career?
I know a little bit about that, yeah. So there's been numerous books that have been written about him. and one of the first books come out. Charlie Pierce wrote a nice book about him, and Charlie Pierce actually interviewed me. So I'm actually mentioned in about 8 or 9 books that are out there about the Patriots, because I'm kind of a guy that follows a lot of that. But yeah, I mean, you look at what Tom Brady did. Matter of fact, I brought some of this here. There's a media guide that, now that you mentioned it, we can have some, we got plenty of these. So when he came out in 2000, 199th pick, that's his little bio from his rookie year, you know. So we got other copies over here, you know, and he was, you know, a starting quarterback, and, you know, had some great games, but they're like, 199th pick, I mean, what, you know.
Yeah, he shared time with the.
Brian Greasy, yeah. And Drew Henson, and, yep. Yep.
There's a guy that he got signed by actually by the Yankees.
Yeah, Drew Henson, yeah, the baseball player, right, yep.
Brady's combine numbers were.
Yeah, I mean, it was impressive,
It was
you know.
Yeah,
No.
crazy stuff.
But, you know, if you go back to the day, you know, when Robert Kraft and Tom Brady first met, you know, the first part they said is the best decision they ever made, you know. And that was one of the things everyone talked about, you know, how long was Drew Bledsoe going to stick around if he didn't get hit by Mo Lewis? Well, the coaches know and watched, and one of the things that we take a little bit for granted is what some of the guys do on the scout teams. I mean, Brian Hoyer, his job as a backup quarterback is to pretend to be Pat Mahomes or Jared Goff or whoever the Patriots are playing. So when the Patriots defense is playing against the offense, Brian Hoyer is supposed to emulate Andrew Luck or whatever the opponent is. And that's what Tom Brady was doing back then as a backup quarterback. All right, you're going to run the scout team, so our defense, you know, we're going to load you up with a game plan that we think the opponent's going to use. So when our defense sees that in practice, when the game comes, oh yeah, we've already seen that play and we know what to do. Similar to the Malcolm Butler play in the Super Bowl, you know. They practiced that. Do it again. No, you get Brandon Browner, you got to hit him and you got to be there and you got, you know. So, you know, the Dan Connolly kickoff return, we practice that. They practice all these different things. But when the coaches are watching Tom Brady run the scout team as the third or even the fourth string quarterback, like he's here all the time, he's practicing, he's playing intense, he's on the third team. Now he's on the second team, and now they're like, all right, let's give it a shot. So the first couple games, they didn't really ask him to do much. I mean, David Patton had a great game, you know, when he got 2 touchdowns, they threw for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown. But eventually he settled in, and I was one of the games where he beat Doug Flutie in the overtime, you know, 29-26, you know. I was like, hey, we got something there. This kid come back, you know, and beat a team, a good team in overtime here. Maybe there's something here. And who knows that, you know, that they were going to do what they did. So there's a, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this magazine, but if you've read this story, but we got plenty of these. But I mean, Tom Brady just takes it from nothing, you know, and he says, all right, let's do it. And then for him to go back and back and back and back. I mean, we were, you know, when you grew up, you know, we had Tommy Hudson and we had Mark Wilson and we had Mike Talaferro and we had guys that were like, man, Joe Kapp couldn't even throw the ball from here to there, you know. We had a lot of really pathetic quarterbacks, and then now we got the greatest of all time, you know, bar none. I mean, there's this book's been updated a couple times, but you get a chance to pick this thing up. You know, this talks about Tom Brady compared to any quarterback you want to talk about. Johnny Unitas, Otto Graham, you know, Aaron Rodgers, you name it. This guy, Sean Glennon, breaks it down and says, this statistic and that statistic and that statistic, Tom Brady is the greatest. Joe Montana, you name it. You know, Terry Bradshaw, he breaks it down. It's a pretty good book. So a lot of the stuff here that we brought tonight is just to kind of bring you back, just that we're blessed, you know, to have, you know, to go to so many Super Bowls. I mean, you know, you mentioned a couple Giants games and even that Indy game where everyone was sick when Peyton Manning brought us back to 38-34. We lost that game. guys weren't so healthy in the fourth quarter. We kind of ran out of gas there, but it's absolutely amazing. Yes?
How crazy was the Chicago Super Bowl when they somehow made it to the Super Bowl and got blown out by Chicago? Rumors about the players celebrating early.
Yeah, well, we're talking the 80s. In the 70s, there was a lot of LSD and marijuana. In the 80s, there was a lot of cocaine. Yeah? And we had some troubled guys. Irving Fryer is right now still in jail, not for the cocaine, but he was kind of one of those kind of guys. Tony Collins had a major drug problem. And if you investigate it, you'll find out there's a bunch of other guys that had some issues. But then you had guys like Steve Grogan and Steve Nelson and Stanley Morgan that were just superstar players. Andrew Tippett, John Hanna. When we had a loaded team, 76 to 85, 86. We should have done better than we did. But we put it together. So when we beat the Jets, and then we beat the Raiders, and then we go down to Miami and we just smoked them down in Miami with Dan Marino.
That was really the Super Bowl.
That was tremendous. Lester Williams had a big game, Raymond Claiborne, et cetera. I mean, just the list goes on and on. Claiborne had an issue with that as well. So to win 3 road games as the wild card to make it to the Super Bowl was amazing. Jambalaya, people were going crazy, the T-shirts, Eddie Edelman, all that kind of stuff. But the Bears were just loaded, I did get a chance to talk to Raymond Berry, who was the coach there, and he says, if we had one more week, because it was boom, 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 now you're in the Super Bowl. He said, one more week, he says, we would have adapted and played a little bit more of a quicker throw the pass rather than run, because they had like 4 yards rushing the whole game. And that was the only loss that the Bears had was against Dan Marino, just picking them apart. And Eason was a pretty accurate passer, but he had no chance in that game. They knew we were going to throw. He was 0 for 6, and he just said, I don't even want to be here. Here they come, and they're 4 feet away. He's like, don't even hit me. I want to play golf when I'm 50. Sorry, And he is, and he's healthy. That was just, no one was going to beat the Bears that day. They just smoked us and refrigerator Perry and all that kind of stuff. But it was a pretty good run. I mean, that was pretty amazing. And the guys were very pleased to actually win the AFC trophy and to make it to the Super Bowl. But then it took us another 10 years to get back.
Was that the first time a Wildcat?
Yes. Yeah. Pretty amazing. And we had a good bunch of core guys, and a lot of those guys are still around too. I mean, they still, Pete Brock, mentioned, he's around here. So he has a story where actually he is the center. So Hannah is to his left. Hannah is the most intense football player you've probably ever met. And Pete Brock, in his first play, tears his knee, his cartilage in his knee. He's walking back to the huddle like this. And John Hannah says, you all right? He says, I don't know, I think my knee out. And Hannah says, you got one more play in you? Are you going to say no to John Hannah? You're the center. No, John, I can do one more play. And the next play, it's a little worse. And he says, can you do one more play? Yeah, I can do one. And he plays the whole game, right? On one knee. Now, the center is going to get hit from a variety of different angles and linebackers and all that kind of stuff. He had surgery like 2 hours after the game. But he talks about it. He says, I'm not telling any of my teammates I can't go one more play. Whatever you're down and out, you just get the grit and you get up there and you do the best you can with one leg. So he's part of the alumni. You see a lot of stuff. He does a lot of charity stuff. But that was one of the things. And one of his rookie years, he actually caught a pass for a touchdown. And Pete Brock, and he caught a 6-yard pass. He went in as a kind of a tight end, extra blocker, and he ran into the huddle, and the play was 2:22 tight end delay. And he goes to Grogan, and he says, the coach said, 2:22, throw the ball to me. Okay. And he threw the ball, and he caught the touchdown, and they call him deep threat after that. So if you ever see Pete Brock, ask him, hey, how you doing, deep threat? And that's a nickname from, 1976. So he's the only play he ever caught. But he was a center. I mean, they didn't touch the ball, but he was thrilled to get that. A couple days ago, there was a guy, Steve Zabel, who played back in the day with them. And when Steve Grogan got 12 rushing touchdowns in 1976, it was a record for quarterbacks until Cam Newton beat it. So when he ran for his 12th touchdown, it set an NFL record for most touchdowns by a quarterback. And Steve Zabel, who was the linebacker, now John Smith was the kicker back then. He went over to Smith and said, "Smith, you're not kicking the extra point." "What do you mean?" "Get out." And Steve Zabel went out there to kick the extra point, which he did. He says, "I'm going to become famous now that I'm a linebacker kicking extra point because of your, they're going to have my name in the paper because Steve Zabel kicked it." And they did crazy things like that back then, Now, there's a couple stories about kickers. Now, Stephen Gostkowski is tremendous, and Adam Vinatieri kicked probably the greatest field goal ever, to tie the game, not to win the game in the snow. But back after Gino Cappelletti retired, we didn't have a kicker. So we hired this guy, Charlie Gogolak, who would kick sideways. Now, Gino kicked forward straight like this. So stalker style was John Stenerud and all that kind of stuff. So Eddie Edelman and the sports huddle, they said, "We're going to help the Patriots out. They don't have a big staff. They don't have a lot of scouting. I mean, now the Patriots have about 80 coaches. Back then they had 3, whatever they saw in the newspaper, sign this guy up." So Eddie Edelman hooked up and said, "Hey, we're going to do a contest. We're going to do a Superfoot contest. We're going to find a soccer player from England, and he's going to try out for the Patriots." So they did that. They set up with British Airways. They went over to England and used the American air bases over there and tried out a whole bunch of guys. And there was a guy, Mike Walker, who was a bricklayer. And his father said, "Hey, Mike, you're only like 24 years old. You've been playing this soccer since you've been 10 years old. You can kick the football." And they had no idea what a football was, So he goes out there and he just kicks the football, and he can kick it a good distance. He kicked a couple 50 yards. And they're like, "All right, you won." He won $1,000, and he got a plane ticket over here to try out for the Patriots. And he ends up making the team. He plays 2 games, he gets hurt, but he met his wife, and he's lived here ever since. But the Patriots found a kicker from a radio promotion, as part of their scouting team, Mike Superfoot Walker, So, I mean, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff, but, yeah, right, everything on the dime, But when Bledsoe shows up, and then Parcells, and then, we beat the Rams, then things start kick around here, Now we have, people showing up and sellouts. I mean, if you ever went to any of those games back then, it was 20,000 people, 25,000 people. You had to go to Pittsfield or Connecticut to watch a game if you wanted to see it on TV. Right. And we're so blessed for the last 20 years. It's unbelievable. How long is this going to last? I don't know.
Although some people still leave before the end of the game.
Yeah, I know. I don't understand that. So one of the things that's in the book, it talks a lot about these obscure plays that happen. And I got a buddy of mine who actually ended up getting some nice seats, 10 yards back, about the 10-yard line. And after I finished, taking my pictures, I give him a call and say, "Hey, Corey, how you doing? Wasn't that a great game?" And he's like, "Oh, I missed it." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "It was raining, and we were losing by 10 points, and I wanted to get out of there early." "You didn't stay?" No, they scored a touchdown with like 4 seconds left right in front of him. He would have seen the whole thing, and he missed it. So he's going to live this down the rest of his life, that he could have seen this big, huge comeback, and it would have been right there in front of him, and he was in his car trying to drive away.
He had a ton of comebacks.
Oh, he's king of the comebacks. Yeah, Brady is amazing. I mean, you look at the Atlanta Falcons game. I mean, I got the play-by-play of the Atlanta Falcons game, if you wanted to see that. About 50 things had to happen right and wrong for that to happen, I mean, my wife's watching the game, and I'm up in the other room kind of doing some stuff, and she's like, "Bob, what are you doing? You should be watching this." "Oh, man, they're going to have to get a strip sack. They're going to have to get, double 2 points, which they haven't ever done, and they're going to have to, the guys, they can't score any more points. They, if they get in field goal range," and everything happened. It was like, "Oh, well, okay. That's going to happen. Okay, they did this. Chris Long with the penalty and the sack and the catch. I think I have a picture of Edelman's catch. He bobbles it and catches it about 2 inches off the ground. I mean, all those things had to happen. And then, of course, the Malcolm Butler play. So, My wife is, just a sweetheart to put up with all this research that I've been doing. And I remember the day after, she called me and said, Bob, what station is ESPN on again? I want to see that Malcolm Butler play again. I want to see it again. How did he do that? How did he do that? Did they practice? Yes. I mean, these little things like that make the difference. I mean,
I think I heard that they practiced that in a hotel room the night before the game.
Yeah, in a room like this, yeah. Matter of fact, during this Rams game, I don't know if you heard the story, you might have, but Josh McDaniels, as the game's going on, they make a lot of changes. And he writes down, he says, if we can get Gronk one-on-one against this guy, we can get him down the seam. So about 5 minutes before that play, and he says, Brady, let's do this play. And he goes to Gronk, we're doing this. He says, we didn't practice that. I know, I just wrote it up. This is what we're doing right now. Get out there. And he did it, and he caught it about the 2-yard line, and that was a key play. But that was something that they'd never practiced, but they knew what to do. I mean, it was in them, in their brain cell as to, all right, this is what you do, and this we're going to off shoulder, and we're going to throw it this way or that way, and just catch the ball, And so that's one of the things that the Patriots make the Patriots what they are. They make adjustments. They hire smart people. I mean, Mike Vrabel was a linebacker, yet he caught 10 touchdown passes, Troy Brown, intercepting Drew Bledsoe, when he used to catch for him, Judy Edelman played defense, So these guys that kind of go both ways, you got to know the game. I mean, if you ever seen some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, you'll go up there and say, all right, it's third down. There's 2 minutes left. You're an offensive tackle. What's your move if this guy moves over there and that guy moves over there? Who are you blocking? What? You better know right now, we're going to run this play. That's your job. And this is an offensive tackle. He's asking all these guys to ask hard questions. What do you do in this situation? All right, let's go over it again. No matter who it is. And you better get out there and do your play. So, I mean, if they're maneuvering you better be ready for every play. Malcolm Butler, when he made that play, get out there, Malcolm. This is your play. Go. What? You go. He wasn't in the play before. So I appreciate your time. I guess we got a few minutes if there's any questions that people have. I mean, I got hundreds of stories we can talk about. But
Do you travel with the team too? When they
No.
Play? Oh, no.
No, I'm a Woburn guy, so local guy. But I know I've met Patriots fan clubs from all over the world, actually. My book has been sold. I think we've sold about 10,000 copies of that book. I got people in the United Kingdom that follow me, and when they come to games here, I meet them in the parking lot, we hang out, we tell stories. There's people from Vancouver and Japan and Florida and all over the places. So I've had to meet hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've probably interviewed over 200 Patriots players. So it's been pretty cool to kind of hang out, with this kind of thing.
Interact with people outside the New England states that don't give you a hard time?
I did one book signing one time, and a guy was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and he actually spat in my book, and this was right after Ben Roethlisberger had a little incident, and I'm like, really? Your quarterback, did what he did, and we won a couple Super Bowls, and you're spitting in my book, really? I don't understand that, Welcome. Yep.
So you're,
No, go ahead.
you're one of the guys that are up above the big, you're like way up.
Yes, I'm where the banners used to be.
Yes.
So the first game that I was there was 2005. So we won the Super Bowl in 2004, and then they said, all right, everyone look to the banners, and they had the 2001, the 2003, and then the 2004 had an NFL banner in front of it, and then they peeled it off and saw the 2004. Well, I moved over, my camera's here, and I moved over about 4 feet, and I have a white shirt, and I'm just kind of waving to people. So if you see any of the videos or see any of the pictures, there's a guy in white shirt next to that video. That was my first game as a photographer. That's in the 3rd level. And there's been other games where I've actually been on top of the scoreboard where the lighthouse is. On a plywood board, just exposed to everything. But that's pretty cool to be up there too, though.
Do they use any camera work during the game? Like
No, so we take pictures and then we send them into a guy that's on the computer, and then he types all the stuff in. So we try to get it done about an hour after the game.
Yeah.
So one of the things that our guys do is when we take the pictures the first times that both teams have the ball, that disc gets sent in so they can say, all right, here's the starting lineup. So that verifies the starting lineup. So within a few minutes, they're actually typing that stuff in. So when you see it on TV, here's the starting lineup, that information comes from our pictures.
So how about the pictures that are doing any of the replay or any
No.
of the, okay.
I'm taking pictures as they're coming out of this huddle. So like, all right, they're walking towards the huddle, and if they've bent over, it might be a little bit too late because now I can't see them. So as they're coming out of the huddle, click picture, 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 picture. And then if the guys are going in motion, I wait for them to stop, okay, and take a picture. So when you look at it, oh yeah, that's definitely number 11 or 15 or whatever it is. And then as the play goes on, I'm not doing anything. And then, all right, next play. So we take pictures prior to the snap. And then what happens is that those pictures get matched up. So when you look at the play-by-play, each one of these has a timestamp. So they'll say 14:26, the play went off.
Yeah.
13:47, that play went off, between breaks and stuff like that. So my 5 pictures and the other guy's end zone's 5 pictures get matched up to that play. So when they're looking at the play-by-play, the guys on the computer saying, in this play where they ran the 3 yards off tackle, those 5 pictures, these 5 pictures, all right, there's all 22 players on both sides.
Okay.
All right, we'll go to the next play, go to the next play, go to the next play. There's about 170, 180 plays, including kickoff and punt returns in a game.
Okay.
So if I take 5 or 6 pictures per play, kickoffs are kind of fun because I can take some pictures as they're running down the field. So you get some action pictures because sometimes they kind of stand like this and then they start running down. So I can't really get too much until they actually start running this way, and then I can see them fairly clear. Yes?
What did you do before this? Like, how did you first get into this?
So this is just a hobby for me, really. I collect baseball cards and football cards. I have an accounting background. I'm in the finance world, so I like numbers. My dad was an engineer, so I've been around numbers a long time. I played football. This is me when I was 10 years old. Number 41, 80 pounds, offensive guard. Right, here's all the guys that I played with in 1968, And this is one of the first places I went to at a football camp and got these guys the autograph, So I got an autograph to a future Patriot, Tom Sherman, who was a quarterback for about 3 games, Ross O'Hanley, who I ended up meeting his wife, and Jim Colclaw, Quincy guy, and then Gino Capoletti. But I went to a football camp and met some of these guys when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. So it's kind of been in my blood just to follow the game. And I just happened to know some people that did autograph shows, and I started collecting. So one of the things that really got me some notoriety is that when I was putting all these stats together, Eddie Andelman and Gino Capoletti were good friends, and we tried to get Gino into the Hall of Fame. So he said, all right, let's put together all his stats. 61, he's the MVP runner-up to George Blanda. 64 is the player of the year. He had a couple of games where he scored, 24 points a game, 28 points. He's the only guy to score 20 or more points in a game 8 different times, ever. In 100 years, no one's ever done that. Don Hudson, you name it. Paul Awning, we analyzed it all. No one ever did that. He scored 33% of his team's total points scored in a game for a season for 8 years. So a third of their scoring came from one guy. No one's ever done that. So we put together this petition, the Hot Dog Safari, if you remember that. We did it at Suffolk Downs. We went there. We had thousands of people sign this petition. We got all kind of, ESPN, all that kind of stuff to follow it. And then we actually interviewed the 9 guys that were going to vote for him. And 5 of them said yes, and 4 of them said no. Primarily because we weren't on TV. They didn't see him. We lost to the San Diego Chargers 56-10, so we only were in 2 playoff games the 10 years he was there. We don't know him. Yeah, he had 1 or 2 good years, but if he wasn't here, we probably wouldn't have had the Boston Patriots because everyone came to see Babe Parilli and Gino Capoletti. He was a star. So he was a pioneer. So in the process of getting close, Ron Borges, who I'd been on the radio, and I'm known as Bob the Stat Man, coming up with all these obscure stats. Ron Borges said, I've been saying the same thing about Andre Tippett for 14 years in the presentation. If you have this Bob the Stat Man guy, tell me something that I don't know about Andre Tippett, because we get one more shot. I got the 15th year. If we don't get him in now, he goes to the senior committee, and it's much more difficult. All right, I like a challenge. Let's go. I asked the Patriots, could I have access? Could I look up stuff? I gave Ron Borges about 8 or 10 pages of stuff. This game, that game, this game, double team, blah, blah, blah. And he used some of my stats, part of his presentation. And the guy's like, Ron, you've been saying the same thing about Andre Tippett for 14 years. Now you're saying about this game. We didn't know about that game. And he did this in this game. And he caused this. And, wow, okay. All right, he's in. He gets inducted, 2008. So that kind of helped out. My book didn't come out then. So now I've got some people that in the national media through Gino Cappelletti and this petition to get Gino in. Now a little bit, I mean, I don't know how much effect it had, but it had a little bit enough to push him over the edge. And then a publisher called me and said, hey, we understand you got all these stats. And I don't know if you remember Nick Caffato. Nick Caffato passed a little bit, right? So when his kids were younger, Nick Caffato was more of a baseball guy than a football guy, but he was on the radio a little bit on the Patriots beat, 2001, 2002, and I had actually a chance to meet him. He graduated from Northeastern a few years before me, so we got to know each other a little bit. I got on the radio a couple times, gave him a few stats to kind of help him, because he was a baseball guy. I said, here's some football stuff, and he said, hey, Bob, you're pretty cool. So he put some stuff in the Globe about me in 2002. Then they win the Super Bowl, and he writes The Impossible Team and the book that, you know, that talks about when I'm beating the Rams. So now he's got a book deal, a football book with a publishing company. And then we get this Gino thing going on. We got the Andre Tippett, and he calls me up and says, Bob, people starting to know who you are now. I got a publisher that wants to publish you. So my book actually probably would never have been published if it wasn't for Nick Caffato stepping in saying, I got a publisher. I know what you got. I trust your sources. And so, I mean, God bless him, he's passed on, but you know, you got to know people and be in the right places. And Nick was a big thing. And when my book came out, Ron Borges wrote a nice big article about it as well. So that helped give me some acknowledgments out there. So, but in the 13 years, you know, that I've been working, taking the pictures, there's been a couple times where some of the guys will come out and at halftime or something like that, and or they'll call me or whatever and say, Bob, when was the last time the Patriots did this? Steve Buckley have called me, and some of these guys that have, they had a game against the Cleveland Browns a few years ago where they actually had to recover an onside kick and then go down and score. And then they did, and they win. So they recover the onside kick, they score, and now they're like, when was the last time the Patriots recovered an onside kick? Bob, what's the answer? Oh, the Cleveland Browns against a playoff game, and they lost that game. So, I mean, I knew it. But then they said, well, they lost that game. The Patriots just beat them. When was the last time the Patriots recovered an onside kick and actually won the game? I said, well, I don't know. Where's my book? They went and they found my book. It happened once in 1964. Oh, jeez. In a game in September at Boston College, because they weren't playing in Fenway Park, but it was September of '64 against the Jets. Gino Cappelletti and Jim Hunt, but I had it, and then Bob the Stat Man, Bob the historian, found this obscure stat from 1964 that, I mean, I don't know what it meant to anyone, but it was pretty cool to get on, you know, USA Today and all that kind of stuff, that all these hours sitting in this room looking up all this stuff, and it came back to pay off.
With Belichick, knowing his history of the game, when you're doing a stat thing going all the way back?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I like about Belichick, I mean, Phillips Academy, that's where he met Ernie Adams. And Ernie Adams is kind of behind the scenes. I've never met Ernie. I'd love to meet him someday. But, I mean, that's kind of the meats and potatoes of some of the stuff that these guys love. And my book's actually in the behind glass in the Hall of Fame. They have it there, and it's been pretty cool. We'll go here first, yeah.
I worked at Phillips Academy Andover for 13 years.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is Bill Belichick would come
Yeah.
and be very active in the school. And
Yeah.
when I was there, part of it, his daughter was there. And it would be so funny when we play Exeter, and he would be, the football game, he would be on the sidelines with the Andover football team, and the faces of the opposing team.
That'd be pretty intimidating, I would think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
They have Bill Belichick over there.
Yeah. Well, he was actually at a center for the team. And there's a story that as they're going to the line of scrimmage, one of the offensive linemen, they forgot to play. So as they break the huddle, all right, X47, 47, 3, XYZ on 2, break. And as the run, oh, what was the play again? I forgot. So Belichick says, you're blocking that guy to his left shoulder and you're pushing him that way. So a couple plays later, the tackle goes and says, oh, Bill, I forgot to play again. Says, I'm not telling you this time. If you're not playing for this, not paying attention, you're not focused, you can't remember to play 2.5 seconds after it was told you, and you get crushed, then maybe you'll learn your lesson. And then the next play, he says, you know what you're doing now? Yes, I do, I'm not going to ask you ever again, okay? And he was 19 at the time, Yes.
What type of camera do you guys use?
We got a Canon. Yeah, it's
What about back in the day when you would film?
So one of the things that you heard a little bit, back in the day, they did, the 8mm film, and the Patriots used to practice at East Boston. Now, if you've ever been to Logan Airport, there's a soccer field now, but they used to practice right there. And then they would film the practice, and then they would watch the practice. Now, back then, they didn't have a lot of heavy equipment, didn't have a lot of money. So they would put a sheet up from a bed. They'd be sitting on milk crates, not chairs, and watching the film, and then the film would break. They'd have to tape it, hold on a second, and it'd be black and white and be grainy and all that kind of stuff. This is back in the 60s. Bay Pirelli one time needed some Bengay for his pulled muscle, and he says, I just spent $7 on Bengay. Can I get reimbursed? No. Sorry, you pay for it. That's your thing. We can't afford that. Giving everyone Bengay for $6. What do you think this is? And that was one of the problems when they built Schaefer Stadium. There's just a 30-second story when they built Schaefer Stadium. A couple things. One is they put the water tank too low, so they didn't have enough water pressure. And two, they hired union and non-union workers. So when the union workers found out that there were non-union workers, well, guess what? They sabotaged the plumbing to the point where some of the urinals were this high as compared to being down here. So you actually had to stand on a milk carton to relieve yourself. So they had to lower it, they had to change everything, and it took a while. Pipes broke, flooding for about 6 months, It was nasty, but they had a great flush. They had the board of directors go around in one Saturday afternoon and say, let's flush it all at the same time and see what happens. And they had whistles and all that kind of stuff, and all right, go! And they flushed it, and it worked, but it only worked once. And 2 days later, when they played the game and they got 30,000 people flushing, it didn't work because they kept flushing over and over. But as a matter of fact, when they did that, it was a Saturday afternoon, and the Atlanta Falcons were set to board their plane to fly in, because they usually fly in the night before. And they're waiting in the parking lot. What's going on with this border health thing? Are we getting on the plane? Are we playing or not? Hold on, wait a minute. We'll get back to you in half an hour. And then they went around. Okay, the flush worked. You can get on the plane and fly in now. So it was crazy stuff back then, Yes?
Do you think we would have won the Super Bowl had we played Malcolm Butler?
Had we played what?
Why did you play? Did you ever hear that?
Yeah. Did you? Like,
For the Philly game? One play makes a play. I mean, when we played Green Bay and Troy Brown was hurt, and they had a guy, Desmond Howard, return a kickoff, 1 or 2 plays like that could make a difference and get some momentum. Now, whether or not Malcolm Butler would have tackled the guy that Johnson Banamosi didn't tackle the guy on a big 3rd down play, probably. He was a pretty good tackler. But one of the things about preparing, like we talked about that story with Belichick, are you mentally into this game? Are you ready to play? And Malcolm Butler on Tuesday and on Wednesday and on Thursday, when coaches are analyzing him, and are you in? Are you head to this? I'll be ready. No, are you ready for it? I'll be ready. And they just didn't seem that he was mentally there. And you can't count on someone that's, physically they could do it, but to be mentally prepared to play in front of 1 billion people on national TV, there's a bunch of other stories behind the scenes, but who knows? All these guys are physical talents. The difference in most of these games, when you look at, they're 6'5" and they're 270 and they can run like the wind, but what's their mental capacity? It's a mental game. Are you ready? Can you play all 60 minutes? Or are you going to play 57 minutes and quit in the last 2 minutes? You know? I mean, I was telling my wife just the other day, you know, preparing for this, and I said, you know, the Patriots were running sprints like a day before the Super Bowl, up hills to get ready, and the other team wasn't. This is a 60-minute game. You guys better be in top shape. I know you've been running for 6 months, but you're running some more. Get out there, you know, pushing just a little bit more, a little bit more. Can you go a little bit more? So who knows? Would have been nice, you know, but I mean, Philly played a perfect game. You got to give them credit. They did everything right. If Brady had caught the pass instead of dropping it, you know, or, you know, I mean, there's so many 1 or 2 plays. I mean, the Atlanta game, 1 or 2 plays. We could have had 25 of those in a row and hit them, and 1 or 2 we didn't. They kick a field goal, we lose. So who knows? Yeah.
So how many players have come to the Patriots for their final season and done something that put them in the record book? I'm thinking Doug Flutie with the drop kick, and
Yeah.
someone else played.
Yeah, been very good, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The oldest quarterback throw to the oldest receiver.
Right. Very good. You guys are good.
How many of them went into the record book by something they, you know, Belichick gave them the chance to do something?
Probably not many, but there's a few. I mean, some of the older guys, like Vinatieri when he was up there. I mean, the thing about the Doug Flutie, I'm from Woburn, so I was given a presentation about the Doug Flutie drop kick. And there was a guy that did it before that, 1941, this guy, Ray Scooter McLean. And Ray Scooter McLean, the guy raised his hand and said, I know Ray Scooter McLean. Well, I mean, he knew of him because he'd passed. He says, but Ray Scooter McLean was the Woburn High football coach. During the week, he would go out to Chicago, play in a football game, and then come back Monday. So he was a football coach during the week, played for the Chicago Bears, kicked the extra, you know, the drop kick in the 41 championship game, and then 2 days later he's back coaching the Woburn High. So there's a lot of connections and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of players that come back, and a lot of players that try to come back and don't make it. You know, I mean, Randy Moss resurrected his career, you know.
What about Amendola?
Amendola is a tremendous player. I mean, he's not coming back this year, but he kept getting a pay cut, but he's playoff. That was his nickname. You know, make the key play, make the key catch. I mean, you talk about Welker, probably one of the greatest receivers we've ever had. But he didn't make that catch. Oh, you know, I know it was tough, and he's got to turn. You know, Asante Samuel, make that interception, just catch the ball. You know, so.
Welker's the best receiver. What about Julian Edelman? What about?
I think Edelman has surpassed him, certainly in the playoffs. But at the time, I mean, Wes Welker was catching 110 passes a year, you know. You know, he was just amazing, coming out of nowhere from Miami. We just picked him up. And one of the reasons that the Patriots picked him up, there was a game where the Miami Dolphins kicker was injured. So Wes Welker was out there kicking extra points and kicking off, and he's like, who is that guy? Isn't he a receiver? What is he doing kicking? He's pretty versatile. Maybe we could use him. Okay, I see that, you know.
We usually pick up people who torch us in previous games.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Come play for us.
So we'll, you know, we change 20 players a year. We're going to pick up some new players. I mean, Trey Flowers is great, but hey, God bless you, you know, making some money, you know.
I heard a rumor that Wes isn't quite there anymore. He got hit by one too many 100-pound.
That is an issue. I've met some players. J.R. Redmond have made some nice catches in the Rams game. He's having some issues. Ronnie Lepet is a friend of mine. He's having some. He can't drive anymore. Ted Johnson's around. He's on radio now. I've spent some time with him. Tim Fox is an older guy, and he hit a lot, but he's waiting for the day because he's still like, I still got it, but sooner or later, I don't know, you know. You know, they're worried about it, you know. Back in the day, I mean, when we talked about John Hader was 260 pounds. 260 pounds is a quarterback now.
Exactly.
You know, and he was big. Now you get guys with Wilfork, you know, 380, who can run like the wind, and some of these guys, if you get that kind of torque, you get that kind of pressure, you get guys coming from different angles. I mean, Rob Nikovich, he says, I don't want to get hit like a truck every single play. He said, my body needs time to recover, because as a linebacker or a defensive end, you're getting hit from the back and the side and the front every single play. He says, now they're not practicing as much, but you talk about Freddie Smirlis, some of those guys back in the day, they had double sessions. They were hitting each other on Tuesdays, on Wednesdays, on Thursdays. And by the time Sunday came, I'm like, man, we've been hitting each other you know. But, you know, who
But
knows?
They didn't know a lot about concussions back then.
They didn't. They probably didn't, you know. And still they don't know. I mean, there's still a lot of trauma issues and stuff like that. Who knows what's going to happen? But these guys are out there. I mean, of the 1,243 players that have played for the Patriots, about 15% of them played less than 3 games.
Yeah.
The whole career. 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. That's it, you know. Some of them last longer, you know. Julius Adams, 206 games. I mean, you got Tom Brady playing until he's in his 40s. But it's pretty rare, you know, and it's helpful that Brady doesn't get hit as much as, you know, the guys that did back in the day. Steve Grogan's had. He used to get hammered, and he's had numerous operations. Ronnie Lopez had 7 surgeries on his shoulders. So when he meets people, he says, don't tap me in the shoulders, because there's nothing there anymore. I'll hug you, or I'll shake your hand, but don't go, how you doing, Ronnie? No, not much there. So injuries are a big thing, but it's a fun game to watch, you know. They are warriors. They, you know, put on an entertaining product. They have short careers, and most of these guys, you know, are pretty good guys, you know. So I don't know how much time we got.
Let's say,
I'll,
Bob, and I know you can talk all night. Let's say 2 or 3 more questions for Bob.
yes.
Who's your favorite player and why?
I get that a lot. It depends on, I guess, what you're talking about. I really enjoyed my time talking to Gino Cappelletti because he kind of like, he really came from nowhere. He was a bartender, and he got a call and said, hey, there's a tryout. Why don't you come on out, you know? And he was a quarterback in college, and then he actually was a defensive back for a little bit, and then realized he wasn't that fast. He's the only player to get 3 interceptions in a game. And then a few years later, get 3 touchdown receptions in a game. But he was fun to deal with. He's up in his 80s now. Some of the guys like Russ Francis and Steve Grogan, they'd spend hours with you talking about stories. I've had a chance to meet Tom Brady, but only for about 5 seconds. But he was just sweet. You know, how you doing? You know, we took a couple pictures and stuff. Teddy Bruschi's great. Troy Brown, I've spent a lot of time with him. And some of the other names like Hannah, I've done some stuff for the Patriots Hall of Fame, and one time Hannah was running a little bit late. So they said, all right, Bob, get out there and entertain the crowd for 5 or 10 minutes, and it was 20 minutes. And he finally comes out and he says, all right, thanks, Bob. And then we got a chance to know each other. So, no, I can't really name one, but there's a whole bunch of stories. Now, Bob D is a guy, I didn't meet him because he died in the 60s, but I met his wife. And his wife told me the story that Patriots are playing in San Diego, and we're losing the game, and the ball ends up kind of bouncing from the 2-yard line into the end zone. And it's one of the last plays of the game, and as the ball's bumping into the end zone, a little kid sees the ball and runs onto the field, about an 8-year-old kid. And Bob D is the only one that sees this because he's on defense and he sees this kid, and he goes over and he actually just bear hugs the kid. Because within about a half a second, there's going to be 4 other guys that are going to be jumping on the ball. So he actually gets the kid, protects him, and then the ball kind of bounces. He actually probably saved the kid's life because the other guys probably wouldn't have even seen this kid because they were just reacting to it. So, you know, to hear those kind of stories and then to bring them up and then to meet some of the families that say, thank you for putting that out there and remembering a little bit about, you know, my husband or my uncle or whoever it was. You know, it's been, and I've been doing this 25 years, so I've met a lot of people who have actually passed on even after I've interviewed them. So when I tell stories like this, you know, hopefully it brings back some of the memories of guys that played way back in the day, never mind they played, you know, 2 months ago, you know. Any others? What's that?
Have you met Gronk?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
As crazy as he seems, to me, I think it's a game.
He's actually on my business card. No, not many of these left, but yeah. So Gronk actually spoke to the Winchester High School football team and some of the other people that knew he was going to be there, and I had a chance to kind of be there and introduce him and interview him a little bit. And he talked about growing up with his brothers and you know, and playing all kind of sports and, you know, listening to your parents and, you know, and doing your homework but, you know.
That doesn't sound like
You know. But you deal with, you know, but he was a ball. He was fun to be with, and he's a little kid, but he's very smart though. You know, he knows how to, his parents, you know, keep him, his brothers play football. I mean, you know, Gordy plays baseball a little bit. I've been to the old-time baseball game. I've seen that. Gordy plays in that game. So Gordy's pretty cool. But, I mean, Gronk's a blast. There's no question. Yes.
What about Aaron Hernandez? What's your thoughts on that?
Aaron Hernandez, I mean, the guys that make it to this elite level are elite athletes. He was an elite athlete that was a criminal. And there's a lot of guys like that. You can go, you know, all the time. There's numerous books about guys that have done some, you know, I mean, you can go on and on. I can name 20 off the top of my head that, you know, Ray Lewis was involved with some stuff. There's some shaky stuff, you know. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame, and no one says much about that, you know, killing people and stuff. But football is a violent game, and he got to the point where some of those guys, they don't really know what the laws are and you get them upset. He was in a gang when he was 12 or 13 and all that kind of stuff, and some guys never mature. I mean, Terry Glenn was tremendous athlete when he played for the Patriots, but some of these guys, when you get to a 16 or 17 years and then they stop maturing but they still grow, you're still dealing with a 16-year-old kid. Even though you're 25 years old, you're making $8 million a year and you can fly like the wind and catch an 80-yard touchdown pass. You're still a 16-year-old mental kid, you know. So that was a sad thing. There was no question. And how much of that dealt with his trauma with his head? Probably a lot too, you know, because you've seen some stories about his brain was mush, you know.
Let's try to end on a positive note. One last question for Bob.
Will they win it next year, Bob?
So I was thinking about that. What's the next theme? So I've heard Magnificent Seven.
I know what it is.
Yeah, what do you got for a theme for next year?
Win it for Bob.
Win it for Bob.
I have another one.
What the owners are here right
I know, right? So
You're talking about something that gives them the ammunition already. The whole country hates us.
I wouldn't be surprised if he gets suspended for a year too. But
What they'll do it.
I don't know, seven. You know,
I've seen knocking
Seven
on
Heaven?
Seven's door.
knocking on Seven's door. Yeah. So I mean, they're always coming up with, you know, everything we got, not done yet. I mean, you know, all these kind of 3 or 4 word slogans. We'll see what the next slogan is. Blitz for 6. That was kind of funky, but
I think
you know.
Blitzer 6 was cool.
You know. But that would be the next thing. I mean, we're loaded. I mean, we got Gronk, I think. I mean, he hasn't decided yet. We're hoping that he's coming back. But you got Brady and Belichick, and you fill in.
And what about Kraft?
Kraft is.
We're going to try to end on a positive.
I know, all right?